To the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. Today, pursuant to Standing Order 1082, our study of the expenditure plans for Canadian Heritage in 2012-13, and we have here with us once again the Honourable James Moore, Minister of Canadian Heritage and Official Languages. Welcome to you, Minister, and we will turn the floor over to you now for your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, colleagues, in joining me here at this end of the table, as well as my Deputy Minister, Daniel Jean, and also joining me is Robert Herzog as well from my department. And it's Robert's birthday today, so happy birthday to him. I know this is how you always envision spending your birthday, is doing this. So it's safe to say his birthday gets better from here. So good. But mesdames et messieurs, merci pour l'invitation de vous joindre ici.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation for being here today. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to discuss arts and culture of our country. We don't have much time, so I'll be brief. As I said, I'm accompanied by Daniel Jean and Mr. Herzog, who's the Director General Financial Management Branch, Canadian Heritage.
And it's a budget that's focused on what we believe is the most important to Canadians, which is creating jobs, growth, and long-term prosperity. It will support this while also returning us to a balanced budget in 2015. And indeed, we will build on what we have already delivered for arts and culture across Canada, and the importance that arts and culture represent to the quality of life of all Canadians and indeed to the Canadian economy as well. That includes our choices to increase and then maintain funding through a period of fiscal restraint for the Canada Council for the Arts. It includes renewing and locking in for 5 years all of our programs for the support of arts and culture across the government. Nous avons adopté une nouvelle loi à la fois rigoureuse et bien équilibrée sur la protection du droit.
We have a new piece of legislation on copyright. This was applauded by creators and consumers. We have established 2 national museums, both outside the nation's capital, and we're in the process of creating one more, the Canadian Museum of History. A museum in Halifax and one in Winnipeg. We are creating a 3rd museum, the Canadian Museum of History, here in Ottawa.
this committee will have further discussions about my proposal, our government's proposal to create the Canadian Museum of History is, again, just to underline what I've said in the past, and that I believe that this is an issue. The Canadian Museum of History should be treated like the Canadian Museum of Immigration, as well as the Canadian Museum for Human Rights in Winnipeg, as an issue that, frankly, should be, in my view, beyond partisanship. I look forward to the genuine input from the opposition on the legislation that we've put forward to create that museum, on how the mandate of the museum might be improved and tweaked upon if they have some suggested amendments. But we think that the celebration and the support of an institution that is pan-Canadian in focus to celebrate and educate and talk about and continue the study of Canada's history is a very important exercise that I think we should all be very proud of as we head forward towards Canada's 150th birthday in 2017. Notre gouvernement, nous avons aussi doublé le plafond.
We have also doubled the compensation program from $1.5 to $3 million. This is the indemnification limit for all of our museums and art galleries across the country. We have done all of this while at the same time making the Department of Canadian Heritage leaner and simplifying the application process for local arts organisations across Canada.
Canada is thriving. They're doing incredibly well. Just 2 weeks ago, as a matter of fact, at the primetime conference that was held here in Ottawa by the Canadian Media Production Association, they tabled their report that was entitled Profile 2012, an economic report on the screen-based production industry in Canada. In that report, they noted that Canada's film and television production sector grew by over $500 million last year, from $2.5 to $3 billion, a 20% increase, which resulted in the creation of almost 70,000 well-paid jobs across Canada. The volume of Canadian theatrical productions rose by 14% last year, a 10-year high. Theatrical production is an industry now worth over $1/3 billion to our economy each and every year. Canadian television production rose over 21% from 2011. That's a 10-year high of $2.58 billion. The Canadian documentary production in Canada also increased by 15%. It, too, is an industry with over $1/3 billion invested in Canada's economy, $369 million. The Canadian animation and production increased as well by 47% in 2011 to $208 million. These numbers are the result of the efforts of Canadian creators combined with investments of our government, the private sector, and private philanthropy as well, all coming together in support of Canada's creative economy. All told, with all of us working together, we have come an incredibly long way. Because, 60 years ago in Canada, this was not the case. For much of Canada's history, the creative economy was not understood and not supported by any level of government. And the results, quite frankly, were an embarrassment to this country. In June
1951, the Massey Commission published one of the most significant reports in Canadian history on arts and culture. It outlined how Canada's culture was crumbling and slipping into foreign hands. One of the findings of the Massey Commission report in 1951 was that the only truly national publication in Canada was Reader's Digest, a publication that reached households across the country. Of course, Reader's Digest at the time consisted entirely of American content.
In the textbook industry, American textbooks filled Canadian classrooms, and the Canadian students of the day knew more about the 4th of July than about the 1st of July, more about George Washington and Abraham Lincoln than Sir John A. Macdonald, George-Étienne Cartier, or George Brown. In fact, the largest collection of Canadian publications in the world were at the Library of Congress in Washington, the New York Public Library, and at Harvard University in Boston. The National Gallery of Canada at the time had a permanent staff of only 4 people. At the exact same time, at the Toledo Museum of Art in Ohio, they had 26 full-time staffers. In 1948, there were over 1,800 original works of fiction published in Great Britain, over 1,000 published in the United States. In Canada, there were exactly 14. Nous avons fait beaucoup de chemin en matière de soutien.
We've come incredibly a long way in supporting our culture. In the months ahead, we have a fantastic opportunity ahead of us. In 2017, we will be celebrating Canada's 150th anniversary. The road to 2017 will allow us to tell all of Canada's stories to all of Canada. Let's use Canada's 150th anniversary as an opportunity for our creative economy. I know my time here is brief, so with that, I'll turn over to you for questions.
to speak with you today because I think there's a great deal to be proud of in Canada's cultural communities, how far we have come since that Massey report, the great accomplishments that have been achieved by the creative sector in spite of incredibly difficult times when we see larger and larger crowds coming out for festivals than ever before, the philanthropic community stepping up and supporting things. And I think it's really important that this committee continue to do the great work it's done in the past as we move forward to continue to support Canada's creative economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for your presentation. Now we'll go to our time for questions and answers, and we'll start with Mr. Bowen.
And Minister, gentlemen, welcome to our committee meeting. Those of you that take time to share part of the afternoon with us. Minister, you talked about the Museum of Civilization, and I'm just wondering if you can share with us what's happened lately in terms of feedback from Canadians that have been through the museum and took the time to give your office a call.
Sure, I appreciate the opportunity. Like the Canadian Museum of Civilization, which will become the Canadian Museum of History, is actually moving forward very well. Mark O'Neill, the president of the museum, and the board are now undertaking the hard work that it takes to build and to stand up this new museum that will be national in scope, not just a great institution here in Ottawa, but one that is that has roots in all across the country. And they've been going around the country. I know, I'm not sure if they've completed their entire tour yet, but they've been going to cities all across the country and inviting Canadians to come in and participate in a dialogue about how Canadians, again, it's not my museum, it's not yours, it's not ours, it's the Museum of Canadians, going to Canadians and asking Canadians how they think Canadian history should best be told. And there are different ways, of course, to do that. If you look at different history museums around the country and around the world, you can take, of course, a chronological thematic, you can do thematics based on regions of the country, thematics based on different Canadian experiences and so on. So they're having that discussion and dialogue with Canadians. They've been going around the country. The feedback has been great. I know civilization.ca, which is the current website, there's an online opportunity there for Canadians to engage. And as well as, as part of this project, the Canadian Museum of History is going to be, they're signing MOUs with other history museums all around the country. And I had the privilege, I believe it was just 2 weeks ago, in Victoria, the Royal BC Museum, we signed the first MOU with another institution, and there were folks there, we had school kids there, we had the whole staff from the museum was there, enthusiastic about it, signing an MOU which will open up to this museum the entire vault of the Canadian Museum of History. Over 3 million items, 90% of which are in storage right now, will open up that vault so that local museums across the country will have access to it to tell stories of Canada's history locally, not just here in Ottawa. And that's how we're going to bind this country together. There are 3 more museums that I can tell you that we've signed MOUs with. We're going to be announcing them in the next couple of weeks in other regions of the country. And so we're moving forward, and it's going to be a great success. And I hope that all parties will see this for what it is, which is an opportunity to build a pan-Canadian institution to talk about Canada's history.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Minister. Question number 2 here. How can the federal government and the Department of Canadian Heritage play a role in increasing Canada's awareness of their history? You talked about what's happening down south. How can we pull this together in our country and put it on display?
Well, we have, I often say, a couple of years ago, I think it was about 10 years ago now, Jack Granatstein had his great book, Who Killed Canadian History? And I've said to Jack, I said, I don't agree with the title of your book. I agree with the thesis of it, but the title of your book is wrong. I said, Canadian history is not dead, it's alive and well, and it's not who killed Canadian history or who's challenging Canadian history, but it's what. And what is challenging Canadian history is, I think, a system-wide, all levels of government walking away from the importance that we have in teaching and talking about Canada's history going forward. It's a sad but true fact that in only 4 of Canada's 13 provinces and territories is it required for a student to take a history class in order to graduate from high school. New Brunswick, Ontario, Quebec, and Manitoba. Other provinces teach social studies, but it's not specifically history in the way that it has historically been, which is a frustrating thing. I know that you're a former teacher, and it's something that frustrates you as well. So there's only so much that the federal government can do. One thing we can do is build this institution that I just described. The other thing we can do as well is work together on areas where we have agreement and can support funding for the celebration of events of large consequence. It was a national celebration, not a Quebec City celebration, to celebrate the 400th anniversary of the establishment of Quebec City. It's a national celebration to talk about, of course, next year, the 100th anniversary of the beginning of the First World War. It was a national moment of recognition for Her Majesty's Diamond Jubilee last year, and there are other ones to come in the few years. And I think that if we seize on those opportunities and talk about them, and I think it's equally important on the government and all members of Parliament to understand that these things, if they're going to be meaningful to Canadians, have to be thoughtful, about Canadians, nonpartisan, responsibly done, and talking about the facts of Canada's history in an energetic way, and I think we'll come a very long way towards filling the gaps that Jack Van Alstyne identified in his book.
Chair, how am I doing for time?
You're doing great. You have 2 minutes left.
2 minutes. Okay. Minister, as you know, World War I centennial is approaching, as well as other important dates and battles fought during World War II. Could you speak on the importance of recognizing these crucial events for the entire world and for Canadians' sake, or Canadians alike?
Yeah, we'll be coming forward with actually a plan on that very soon. I think the minister, there's the way we've divided up as a government. I don't think this is a secret. I can say this one. I'm responsible, of course, for domestic celebrations within Canada, and the Minister of Veterans Affairs is responsible for celebrations and commemorations that will happen in Europe for the First World War. That's how it's traditionally been done, and we'll continue that as well. But it's really important as well. I mean, I think this country made a real mistake in the past by not taking advantage of the fact that our veterans were alive, the First World War veterans are alive, and learning stories from them, allowing them to tell their stories, to digitize their stories, and to have a proactive effort on that. And one of the things that we're doing, that we've already put funding forward, and we've announced a second tranche of funding as well now for the Korean War as well, is we're working with the legions all across the country and reaching out to veterans all across the country and asking them to come forward and tell their stories, and digitizing them, housing them at the Canadian War Museum, putting them online so students can have access to their stories. And these are stories of gallantry in battle, of service and self-sacrifice, maybe stories about how they met the love of their life and came home after the war and had a new beginning for their life. Stories of sorrow and maybe stories of courage and pride or fear. All those stories. And so we're working with the Legions, reaching out to Second World War veterans and ask them to come forward and tell us those stories so we can digitize them, make them available to the next generation so their stories will forever be protected in Canada. We missed that opportunity with the First World War, but because it's the centennial of the beginning of the war, I don't think we should miss the opportunity still to tell the stories of the First World War to Canadians. And so we'll be doing that with a commemoration program that I think all members of Parliament will embrace as something that I think is meaningful and respectful to those who fought for Canada.
I think I'm out of time.
That's just about it.
Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, next we will move for 7 minutes to Mr. Nantel.
Merci, Mr. Chair. Monsieur Jean, Monsieur Herzog.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, thank you for accepting our invitation, and thank you very seriously, because normally members of the committee need to review the estimates and the budget, and it's fortunate that you're here to discuss the plans and priorities. We haven't seen any reports on plans or priorities. Do you think that's surprising that we're here without having an opportunity to check what we're doing with those estimates? Do you find that acceptable, that there's been no report on the plans and priorities? The process is no different from in previous years. Well, hold on a second. We're in difficulty now, and we could have had up until the 31st of May to review this. Well, it's up to the committee to determine what you want to do. I've been invited here today, and I'm prepared to answer your questions. Okay. Well, fortunately, you are here, as I said. I'd like to ask you a question about the Council of the Arts. There's about $1 million lost in the budget. Grants and services to support creation, production and dissemination, page 18, section 2. This is considerable amount of money lost, but what worries us more is to ensure that Canadian Heritage's contribution of $25 million is maintained. Yes, that envelope will be maintained. My assistant just told me that it was that particular amount included. This was part of the official languages roadmap, which concludes in March this year. And at the House of Commons in the last year, it was announced that we'll be renewing our roadmap, and there will be envelopes for this investment in the past, and this will be in our new roadmap that will be tabled very soon. Okay. could we say that the total budget of the Council of the Arts will be maintained at $181 million? Yes, that was one of my goals when we started the process last year. It was a long process to find savings across the government. The first principle I said to my team was that I wanted to protect the investments of the Canada Council for the Arts, and I'm sure that you've heard the same things as me around the country, that the Canadian Council for the Arts and the Auditor General said this in the past, is an organisation that does work that is well respected by artists across the country, and they need to, the best way of delivering the goods is to do so is to have their investments protected. Thank you very much. I'd like to talk about two organisations in the 2012 budget. Yes, you guessed it, the Program for Arts and Culture and Diversity that provided funds to organisations, and the Canadian Conference of the Arts and the Federation for Cultural Diversity. Quebec and Canada were real leaders in UNESCO. Has adopted the Convention for Diversity, and the government has cut the lifeblood to this organisation, and this played an important role. So can we understand from this that the federal government's priority is to really protect diversity, cultural diversity? Yes, it is an obligation and a responsibility, and we're proud to protect the interests of our artists, not only just in terms of our investments in culture, in Canadian heritage, but also through policies that in that vein, and our investments in the Canada Council for the Arts. But with respect to those projects you mentioned, those were short-term projects that have expired. There's other projects such as the Conference of Arts. This is an organisation that, quite frankly, well, there were 800 organisations that were sub-members of that, and it was up to them to continue. We want to invest in culture, not in organisations that in the past have basically done and achieved nothing.
Ending funding for the Canada Conference of the Arts, the protestations were virtually non-existent because many cultural organizations realized that that's an organization that over the years has gotten incredibly stale, to the point where I don't think there was a more high-profile or important debate that we had in this Parliament. In a respectful way, our parties disagreed on some of the elements. We agreed on others on copyright legislation, right? It was a critical issue for artists in this country, and the Canada Conference of the Arts didn't take a position. I mean, what kind of an arts advocacy organization doesn't actually take a position on the most important arts legislation to come before Parliament in a decade? But they didn't. And I can tell you, when we ended funding for the Canada Conference for the Arts, we didn't create a vacuum. There are other organizations that stepped up, and you've met with them, and I've met with them as well. You know, the Canada Coalition for the Arts stepped up, and they're a great organization that's actually pan-Canadian.
If I may.
And we've worked with them very well.
De toute évidence, vous êtes très passionné à dire qu'ils n'ont rien fait. Je trouve ça.
Clearly, you're enthusiastic about the fact that they've done nothing. They've delivered documents that can challenge C11, and that there were several organisations in Quebec and in Canada, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about figures. The Canada National Roots Program, PROMART, and a number of other programs that promote Canada on the world stage to develop new markets. In 2008, the Canadian ambassadors stopped helping to disseminate the talents of our artists in other countries and develop their talent. Why has Canadian Heritage not proposed new programs to promote art and culture abroad and to promote our cultural economic activities on the world stage? I don't agree with you. There are two programs. There was a decision that was taken by the former minister about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. That was a long time ago. 6, not 5, 6. But we're not going to renew those programs. That decision was made a long time ago. But it's not true that Canadian Heritage is not doing our job by assisting our artists on the world stage. In fact, there are 21 programs in Canadian Heritage where we help our artists on the world stage. And we've done so in other ways. The Council of Arts, the Canada Council of the Arts have a big budget. Well, that's the problem. That's the problem. Since the demise of those two programs, the Council of the Arts has to use its own funding for creation to facilitate distribution abroad. That's the problem. Well, it's better to go through the Canada Council of the Arts because they understand better the needs of artists, because it is an organisation of artists for artists. We work alongside them for their mutual benefit. Now, what you also need to understand is that in embassies abroad, they have budgets still to assist artists when they come. Well, that's not what we hear. That's not what we hear. Just to conclude, well, you know, there's additional burdens that they have, and yet the budget has remained the same.
Work. I mean, when I talk to Simon Bro, when I talk to the board there, they're actually quite happy to take on this work. The idea that the Canada Council of the Arts, which under our government has had a 20% increase in funding, right? The idea that they should stay static and not move their funding around to meet the needs of artists is the opposite of why you create a Crown Corporation independent of the government to work to the best interest of the artist, right? So the Canada Council of the Arts has a budget. We've increased it by 20%, and they're moving their financing around to go in the best ways to help artists. And they've decided now that this is one of the things that they want to do, is to help artists on the international stage. That's their job. That's a good thing. They're working at arm's length, and we applaud.
It is their job, but they need more.
Mr. Nantel, your
Everybody
time's
needs more.
way over
Sure.
now.
Thank you,
Mr.
Chair.
Sims.
Thank you, Chair. Good to see you again, sir. You said earlier it's a mistake, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, it's a mistake to forget our collective history. You were talking about it in regards to the new museum. I understand that. We do not currently have a museum of that stature. But the problem is this: when you start using words like digitization, collection of our, collecting the works of our history, there are a group of people out there. I mean, you mentioned one group that they didn't protest too much. One group that did protest a lot, and that's Library and Archives Canada. They're not happy. And I would never think to tick off a librarian to the point where they keep writing me to the nth degree, but they're very good at it. One of the programs that was in there was a great little program. It worked in my riding, it worked in hundreds of ridings. The NADP, it allowed small communities to digitize, to archive their collective history. If you want to see collective history, sir, I don't think cutting programs like this is the way to go, because it seems to be that now you've got a centralized version of history that can only be done by the people who can afford it outside of government help. I know the budget's tomorrow, and it's always a little awkward to talk about estimates before we actually get our budget. But in saying that, I think the Library and Archives Canada has a pretty good beef about this program and the ILL that they use. Would you not agree? Is there something for them?
Sorry, is there something tomorrow? Is that what you said?
Well, I'm saying, yes. I know I got one more sleep, as the saying goes,
exactly.
but...
Look, there are, as I've said in the past in the House in some different contexts, when you put together a proposal, look, we were elected as a government, of course, asking Canadians to entrust us with a majority government, and that we would arrive at a balanced budget without raising taxes, without cutting health care, right? So that means we have some difficult choices to make, and I have to tell you, this was a difficult choice. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. But when we worked with Daniel Caron, we worked with Library and Archives Canada, and we asked them to put together proposals to reduce their spending by between 5 and 10%. And to come up with the programs that are the least efficient and the least effective in their eyes, based on their own self-assessment. This is what they arrived at as the program that was the least effective. It doesn't mean that in the future.
But Minister,
it doesn't mean that in the future that there won't be a reallocation of resources to try to backfill some of the lost opportunities that you described.
Well, I look forward to the backfill. But the one thing I can say about people involved with Library and Archives Canada, you mentioned actually in question period that you would have. You suggested that the respective critics should bring Mr. Caron into this committee to speak to us. If I was to move a motion to have Mr. Caron and others come in to talk about the situation that we currently see ourselves in with Library and Archives Canada, because if you're talking about a shift, then let's talk about the experts who know how to do this. Sure. Would you recommend to the whole committee that they come in?
And I believe that Mr. Calandra, my parliamentary secretary, has spoken with Mr. Nantel to that exact effect about having a motion before the committee. That was yesterday in question period with regard to the issue of the code of conduct, and that's in the news in the last few days about this. But absolutely, look, Library and Archives Canada, like the CBC, like our national museums, they operate at arm's length. I don't involve myself in their day-to-day decisions. And so if you have questions, that's the job of Parliament, right? Parliament, all of us. We vote on the budgets, we vote on the mandates and the law.
But I did ask for them to come before, and they got voted
has their
down.
mandate, they have their budget, and if they're making decisions on either the code of conduct question or in the allocation question, if you want to ask them about how do they backfill and go forward in it with the existing budgets, if they can do it, if you think that's a priority, then that's exactly what parliamentary committees are for, is to bring the heads of agencies who are making decisions at arm's length from me. The law prevents me from telling them what to do and not do. Then that's precisely what I would encourage you to do. And so if you put that motion before the committee, I think you'd have a favorable outcome.
Do you find that the mechanism that we currently have with granting is one that is transparent enough? And do you think that there should be greater transparency with some of the groups that get the money?
Yeah, I think the outcomes are very transparent. We publish a list. If you go to the Department of Canadian Heritage, it's down to a dime. Everything that every organization gets. In the Canada Council for the Arts, it's exhaustive, the reporting that they do. The Auditor General looked at the Canada Council and they came back and they said if every Government of Canada organization was run as efficiently as the Canada Council, that she wouldn't have a job. This is Sheila Fraser who said that. So I think it's done quite well. One thing that does, I suppose, that has frustrated me a little bit is a little bit what, and it wasn't his point, but is that very often with cultural funding, there's an expectation that because you received $5,000 for your Canada Day celebration, or because of your Festival du Bois in my riding, for example, they get $5,000 a year for some staging equipment, some fencing, and some lights and all that, and sheet cake for the kids and whatever, to add a little something to it. That because they received it one year, they should get it in perpetuity. And the problem with that, of course, is that there are all kinds of very entrepreneurial, cultural people out there who wish to have access to funding for the first time, who often can't get it because we have funding organizations, sometimes like the Canada Council, who are afraid to upset incumbents who are currently getting money. And I think that there needs to be a little bit more accountability and flexibility in the openness.
Some might say some of these numbers and the agencies that you fund directly through the department, it's not a transparent process. I'm assuming you disagree with that, but why would
Some
you?
say. I don't know who's saying that, and if they want to say that and make an argument, I'd
Well,
be glad,
certain
I'd be glad to hear it.
festivals maybe, and
What's
all
that?
that sorts of things. Is there any way that you feel that you can improve the process of transparency within your own department, like when it comes to festivals, if certain festivals don't get their funding?
We're pretty upfront. I'll give you an example. There are two communities in British Columbia who are celebrating their centennial years this year, right? And I extend this to any member of Parliament. I say this often. A lot of communities, as you know, especially municipalities that are very small, or organizations, as you know, Scott, like there are a lot of organizations in this country that are volunteer-led, right?
Yeah.
And these are not people who are professional politicians at getting government funding and support. They don't have a bunch of lawyers and accountants and actuaries who can go in and get all this stuff. And then they're working on a volunteer basis, and sometimes the applications can be too cumbersome and a hassle. What I often tell organizations, especially those who are applying for funding for the first time, is call my office, and we'll sit them down with the Department of Canadian Heritage staffer in the regions, because we have offices all across the country, and they sit down with staffers of Canadian Heritage and they say, here's what we have in mind for our festival. How do we put forward and put together our festival in a way that will be successful for applications? Not how do we apply and then get turned down and then, oh my God, it's the 11th hour, we can't have our festival this year. Start it the other way around. What does one have to do to qualify for funding? Design your festival that way, and then you have a successful outcome. And we've had great success with that all across the country with organizations. So that's what we try to do, to try to get rid of any mystery that there might be between the department and organizations who are seeking funding, because it's not how it's supposed to be. We don't want to have a tall wall that's impossible for small organizations to scale. So.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Next, we will move to Mr. Hillier for 7 minutes.
Merci, ministre, pour être venu ici pour parler avec nous.
Thank you very much, Minister, for coming here to speak with us today. I'd like to speak about heritage in general and our history.
Making Canadians in general more aware of their history. You talked about, the fact that there's several provinces who don't have history as a required course, that they squeeze that into their social studies. I come from pretty conservative country where everything seems to have a practical, everyone wants to know the practical reasons for doing things, for time and resources and money. But, you know, you've talked in this committee before about, you know, how investing in the arts and in culture in general will actually have an economic turnout, but spin-off, but not even focusing on that. Can you address not just how we're going to help Canadians increase their awareness of history, but why? Why is that so important? You know, Canadians, a lot of us think that our history started in 1867. We have a really rich and fascinating history since then and also before then. But who cares? Why would we want to spend time and energy on that?
As you said, our pre-Confederation history and the importance of it is why we supported so robustly the 400th anniversary of the founding of Quebec City. It's why, as well, we're very proud of our commemorations of the bicentennial of the War of 1812 as well. The War of 1812 was the most important thing, pre-Confederation, that led actually to the Confederation of Canada in 1867. Without the War of 1812, you don't have the protection of Aboriginal peoples. Aboriginal Canadians would have had much the same future as American Indians did. The protection of the French fact in North America, the defining of our territorial boundary and integrity with the United States, and it also paved the way to Confederation in 1867 with the conferences in Quebec City and Charlottetown in 1864. So it was the most important event that happened prior to Confederation itself. So you're right. But your bigger question, I always phrase it this way. Canada is the second largest country in the world, but in terms of population, we're the 34th largest country in the world. And this is a country about whom great number of things that can be said. The most impressive thing about which can be said is that in spite of extraordinary differences of East and West and North and South and Protestant and Catholic and Francophone and Anglophone and Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, this is a country that with extraordinary tensions East and West and all over this country, we have been able to not only endure and stay united, but thrive in a way that few other countries in the world have. And it's a remarkable achievement by all Canadians that we've been able to do that over the years. And it's a very impressive story, and I think Canadians should know more about it, and we should have institutions like the Canadian Museum of History that talk about that. And by the way, not just the great and glorious and wonderful stories, but also wrestle with some of the more challenging questions of our time, right? Japanese internment, Chinese head tax, the treatment of Aboriginal peoples in our residential schools. I mean, we've had some very, very challenging parts of our history, issues about which we should not be afraid to discuss and debate and talk about. The War Museum does it already in some ways. The Canadian Museum for Human Rights will do it as well. But Canada's history is a story of real impressive achievements in spite of extraordinary odds against our survival. And these are the things that we want to highlight and talk about and celebrate in a nonpartisan way as we head towards 2017. And I again, hope that all political parties will take me up on my sincerity that that's really what we're trying to do. That's really what we want to have accomplished. That's why we've put, people on the board of the new Canadian Museum for the Museum of Canadian History that who are not conservatives. I mean, Richard Gwynn is on the board. Richard Gwynn is a columnist with the Toronto Star, who's very thoughtful and smart and intelligent man. Pierre Trudeau's biographer. He also wrote the biography of John A. Macdonald, a very thoughtful guy. We put him on the board as well because of expertise in Canadian history. This is an effort that I hope all parties will see the merit in and will support the legislation when it comes before this committee.
Thank you. Yeah, the more I study Canadian history, the more I feel if we had a better understanding of it, a lot of our issues of unity and the conflicts amongst the various founding peoples and the new immigrants who are coming in, a lot of those problems would resolve as we had a deeper understanding of how we got to this point and recognize those achievements. And so now I'm going to get a little bit broader beyond history and just talk about heritage itself. I actually put the heritage as my #1 pick for which committee I would like to be on. And a lot of people wonder why, because we talk about how important the economy is, and it is our government's #1 priority, and I think it should be. But the fact that Canada's leading the world right now economically is not really what defines Canada. It's our heritage. So how, we're talking about millions and millions of dollars. What does heritage have to do? Like, if economy is our priority, why are we spending money on heritage in general, not just on the history part of it?
Well, it's a falsehood, and I say this as well, some of you have been to my movie nights as well. We've had 9 movie nights on Parliament Hill, 3 music nights. We'll have another movie night in April as well, and you'll hear me again beating this drum and telling these numbers that anybody who you encounter who suggests that arts and culture isn't central to the Canadian economy is someone who doesn't get it. Arts and culture represents $46 billion in the Canadian economy, over 640,000 jobs. It's 3 times the size of Canada's insurance industry. It's twice the size of Canada's forest industry. And it's a massive generator of economic growth and activity in all regions of this country. So it is part of the economy. But second, you're right. I mean, I too am passionate about Canadian history and passionate about Canada. And and when you have those great moments like we had in Vancouver, we had the privilege of hosting the 2010 Olympics, and we had these great moments of celebration across the country. It's something that I think that has been lacking for a lot of our country's history, which is to have great moments of celebration and recognition of Canadian achievement. And we have a lot to be proud of as we head towards our 150th birthday.
Mr. Cash, for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the Minister for being here, and Mr. Jain and Mr. Herzog. So I'm just going to take a minute here and address a recommendation from you, Minister, that you made in the House during question period on Monday, and you referred once again to a few minutes ago. So I'd like to give notice of the following motion, that the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage undertake a comprehensive study of the recent changes at Library and Archives Canada, including the introduction of a code of conduct, and invite relevant witnesses, including Danielle Caron, as well as representatives from library, archivist, and archaeological associations. Based on your comments, I hope that your parliamentary secretary and the rest of the Conservative members on the committee will support the motion, and I look forward to that happening. Perhaps we could get unanimous consent now and move on. If not, we...
Okay, there's a motion to move in camera.
Well, actually, don't I have the floor? Can he move a motion while I have the floor, Chair?
Well, yeah, there's a motion to move in camera, so...
Yeah, but he's got
But actually, don't I have the floor right now?
You just moved a motion. Your time
he's moved a motion.
To go in camera.
That's right. You said you were introducing a motion, but we're not debating.
No. I'm
sure he'd be happy. Just
Well, Mr. Calandra has a motion to move in camera, so all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, we will take a little break while we move in camera.
That's unfortunate.
Has about 4 minutes left, so Mr. Cash.
I wanted to get into the issues of the reality of how artists make a living in Canada, and the sense that we have that your government doesn't understand the way artists make a living in this country. And one of the reasons that we feel this way is because when your government slashed StatsCan, the budget for StatsCan, it was forced to abolish its culture division and its programs to understand arts and culture in Canada. The music industry is one that I know well, and it's close to my heart. And based on a Canadian Independent Music Association study or report recently, they pegged the average annual income for musicians in Canada at $7,228. Again, for the so that's the reality for many people in the music sector. But the independent music sector, for every dollar that the government spends on support, it gets back about a 22% return on investment. So for a dollar that federal or provincial governments put into the independent music sector, they get $1.22. $76 million was invested from combined provincial and federal sources, and $93 million was received in revenue in 2011. I just want to do a couple other quick little facts, and the reason I'm doing them is because we need to track these things. In 2011, the total direct impact on GDP from all culture and arts sector, well, we know that the number for 2007 for the sector in totality with the spin-offs was $84 billion, and in 2011 the direct impact on GDP was about $46 billion. Now, some of these numbers are from the Canadian Independent Music Association, and some are from Conference Board of Canada. And so the question is, isn't it time, now you've mapped out a lot of ways in which the government works in the arts and culture space, but isn't it time to invest in departmental measures to help government understand how artists make a living in this country?
I agree, and we've increased that funding. You mentioned at the beginning of your question or statement, or what that was, with saying that our government has ended cultural collection of data through Stats Canada. That's factually not true. We've actually taken money from our department, $500,000 of internal administrative costs, and we've continued to collect that data. So there's actually no gap that you're describing. And as a matter of fact, we've increased the data collection to achieve exactly what you've described, because it is important. As you said, we talk as a government about the importance of culture, not just for its own sake and for the sake of quality of life and community living and all these things, but it also is incredibly important for the economy, and that's why you do have to know where artists are getting their money from, as you said, because that is an important thing to keep track of.
So, Minister, there's been a lot of talk about how seasonal workers are affected by cuts to EI. But there's been very little talk about the effect of those cuts on the arts and culture sector. The Directors Guild of Canada said that new regulations may force some members whose use of employment insurance benefits places them in the frequent claimant category out of the screen-based industry. That's their concern. So I'm wondering, were you consulted by the minister on how changes to EI would affect artists, and did Heritage provide any impact notes on EI reforms and how they would affect artists?
That's a good question.
Mr. Cash, your time is up, but we'll allow just a quick response from the minister.
Look, certainly the reforms that Minister Finlay has put in place are reforms that are widespread, and of course the whole goal of them, of course, is to make sure that Canadians have EI when and where they need it across the country, regardless of the nature of their employment. But if you have a specific question, it sounds like a reasonable one, if you have a specific question about how the EI reforms are impacting Canada's cultural communities across the country, again, you're free to invite the minister here to describe those reforms in detail and how they impact the cultural community. Because don't forget that when we make changes to policy with regard to employment insurance, for example, it's not just a budgetary measure. It's not these also can be amended and tweaked over time through regulation. And if there are particular regulations that can be implemented that would have a beneficial outcome to the overall goal of our government, which is to have a healthy and strong EI system when and where Canadians need it, then I know that Minister Finlay is a very reasonable person who's more than open to hearing those suggestions if they're coming from a place of sincerity.
Okay, Mr. Richards for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here, Minister. Got a few questions. Hopefully I'll get time for them all. But first one that actually in response, I think it was Mr. Bowen was asking about the upcoming centennial of World War I, and you mentioned in response about the efforts being made to digitize the stories of the Second World War veterans and now the Korean World War veterans. And that's something that I've believe very, very strongly in. I know I had an opportunity to take my son about 3 years ago when he was 14 and one of his friends over to tour some of the battlefields that Canadians had fought on, and to see Juno Beach where so many Canadians laid down their lives for our freedoms. And the impact that it had on my son at 14 years of age to see those battlefields and to see those beaches. I think it's something that all young Canadians should have some ability to be able to experience, and I think through those stories is one of those ways. Certainly, our generation, we had the opportunity, whether it be fathers or grandfathers, to hear firsthand those accounts, those stories of the sacrifices that were made on our behalf. And I want to just ask a little more, because I know I had a chance to participate and bring the Memory Project to my riding to visit with a lot of my World War II veterans, and I know there was a lot of great stories that were shared, and I think are going to be very well preserved for future generations to be able to have that understanding. But you mentioned in the Korean, and I know the World War II project was in partnership with the Dominion Historic Institute. I assume the Korean project is as well. Can you give us a little more information as to that project, how it's proceeding, and what we as members of Parliament can do to help and support that?
It's modeled just, frankly, in very much the same way, and anybody who's curious about it should go to the Historic Dominion Institute, which is managing the Memory Project, and they'll follow the same procedure because we found that it was very successful as well. Like you, I've taken, one thing, we fly to and from Ottawa a lot. You're from Western Canada, so we accumulate a lot of Aeroplan points, and I've, over the years, taken it upon myself, my own self-guided trips to go to grave sites, Commonwealth grave sites, frankly, in all different parts of the world. And I have on my desk, I have sand from all 5 D-Day beaches. Of course, Juno is prominent. And then I have rocks from the beaches of Dieppe. I have sand from the beaches of Anzio. And I have a rock from the train bed of Auschwitz as well, from a different tour that I did of 16 different Holocaust camps. Because it's very important to understand World Wars I and II, what they were about, why they fought, what was sacrificed, what was to be learned from those battles as well. And I've had the privilege to actually go and visit all these different sites and learn those lessons and see those museums and talk to veterans. It's one of the great things actually that the War Museum does here in Ottawa, is that when you go in there, typically the first person that you'll meet is a veteran, all volunteers. All volunteers. I mean, even I went and did a tour of the Diefenbunker a month ago or so, and you go in there and there's veterans just waiting to volunteer to come back and to tell their stories. Just after a life of public service in the most noble way possible, they give back and they volunteer again at our museums to tell our kids stories. And it's an impressive thing. And so anything that we can do to make it easier for them to tell their stories, not just to those like me who have the privilege to get to go and visit all these museums, but to generations and generations of kids to come and digitize their stories and have them online at the National Canadian Museum of History or at the National War Museum, so that kids can go and hear in the correct tone and the voice and the chosen language about how people describe their experiences. It's incredibly impactful, and that's what we're trying to achieve with the Second World War project, which has gone well, and the Memory Project's extension for the Korean War as well. It's really important.
Well, I thank you, Minister. I mean, that's a very, very important thing that future generations have that ability to share in those stories, and I thank you for your efforts in doing that. I'm going to turn the rest of my time actually over to Mr. Calandra.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Just in light of the brief but very fruitful discussion with colleagues, I move the following. I seek unanimous consent to move the following motion, Mr. Chair, that the committee invite the President of Library and Archives Canada to appear before the committee and inform the members of his vision and the future mandate of Library and Archives Canada.
Okay, Mr.
I seek
Calandra
unanimous consent for that.
is asking for unanimous consent. Do you want to repeat that, or
Sure.
is everyone...
That the committee invite the President of Library and Archives Canada to appear before the committee and inform the members of his vision of the future and mandate of Library and Archives Canada.
He had already given notice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was already notice of that motion, so we can deal with that motion. Is there unanimous consent? Same motion that was already distributed, Mr. Calandra, or it's...
No.
Okay.
Distributed. I have to check now.
Well, does Mr. I mean, regardless, if there's unanimous consent, the motion can pass. So is there unanimous consent for the motion, Mr. Sims?
To debate. To debate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Debate the motion.
Okay, Mr. Nantel wants to move an amendment.
I would like to move an amendment as well. That
Okay.
was the point of my interjection. Not sure at what point you want to do the. Can we do this at this point?
Mr. Calandra, you're asking for unanimous consent to... you're asking for unanimous consent for the motion. No, for the motion. Yeah, so is there unanimous consent for the motion?
Agreed.
Can I move to go
Not
into
in
camera?
camera now, no.
Can I move to go into camera?
You can move to go in camera. There has to be a vote on that.
What?
So, Mr. Sims has
No.
asked that we move in camera. Those in favor?
Do it, because I'm beginning to think you
Oh,
can.
man. It's ridiculous.
No, because
Okay.
I tell you, he just. No,
We have the minister here. The meeting is going to be over in 30 seconds anyway. But Mr. Sims has asked
But
that we move in camera.
if he moves for unanimous consent, am I able to move to go in camera at that point? That's my question.
Well, he will have already had unanimous consent for his motion. So the
No,
motion
no, he didn't. He didn't get it. He didn't get it yet.
No, we want to amend it. Point of information here.
Mr. Nantel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that the idea here is that we're asking for unanimous consent to discuss the motion.
Calandra has asked for unanimous consent, so I'm going to ask, is there unanimous consent for his motion? No, for his motion.
No. For his motion as it is? No,
Yeah.
I have an
No.
amendment to
There's
put.
not unanimous consent.
Any time
You
left, I guess?
have no time left. And Minister, thank you for coming here for the hour. We appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time to answer our questions and for the information. And we look forward to your return visit some point in the future. Meeting, we'll just allow the minister to leave, and we have a few procedural votes to deal with. We'll suspend for 30 seconds. Okay, as is the practice, you all have a number of votes that are in front of you. It's voting on the main estimates, 2013-14. And I'll just quickly go through these. It usually takes about 30 seconds, but shall vote 1 carry. Yeah, go ahead.
Please, can I ask you to repeat what you just said?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
You have these votes in front of you, and those are the votes on the estimates. So I will go through one by one asking if the vote shall carry. And this way I can report this back to the House as we've looked at it. And if we don't vote on it, it'll be deemed reported back anyway, unamended. But normally we would want to vote on it.
So can I... we feel strongly that on aurait besoin d'un délai pour étudier.
We need a little time to study this further before we vote. So we'd ask for a bit of time.
Till 4:30. How much time do you want to have?
I mean, to next meeting.
Okay. We can still vote, though. So, I mean, do we want to wait on the vote till the next meeting, or do we want to just proceed with the vote? I mean, it's up to the committee, but I need some direction from the committee.
I move that we proceed.
Okay. So, who is in favor of moving to proceed with the vote? Okay, we will, who's opposed? Okay. We will proceed with the vote. Shall vote 1 carry. Okay, vote 1 carry. Shall vote 5 carry. Those in favor? Opposed? Vote 5 carries. Shall vote 10 carry. Those in favor? Opposed? Vote 10 carries. Shall vote 15 carry. In favor? Mr. Brown, are you in favor? Yeah. Opposed? Okay. Vote 15 carry. Shall vote 20 carry. On division? Shall carry on division? Okay, you're saying no. So carry on division? Okay.
No.
No, okay.
No.
Well, then, those in favor of shall vote 20 carry. Those in favor? Those opposed? Vote 20 carry. Shall vote 25 carry. In favor? Opposed? Vote 25 carry. Shall vote 30 carry. In favor? Opposed? Vote 30 carry. Shall vote 35 carry. In favor? Opposed? Vote 35 carry. Shall vote 40 carry. In favor? Opposed? Vote 40 carry. Shall vote 45 carry. Those in favor? Mr. Young, you in favor of vote 45? Okay. Those opposed? Okay, vote 45 carry. Shall vote 50 carry. Those in favor? Those opposed? Vote 50 carry. Shall vote 55 carry. Those in favor? Those opposed? Vote 55 carry. Shall vote 60 carry. Those in favor? Opposed? Vote 60 carry. Shall vote 65 carry. Those in favor? Opposed? Vote 65 carry. Shall vote 70 carry. In favor? Opposed? Vote 70 carry. Shall vote 75 carry. Those in favor? Opposed? Vote 75 carry. Shall vote 80 carry. Those in favor? Opposed? Vote 80 carry. Shall vote 85 carry. Those in favor? Opposed? Vote 85 carry. Shall vote 90 carry. Those in favor? Opposed? Vote 90 carry. Shall vote 115 Telefilm Canada purposes set out in the Telefilm Canada Act in the amount of $99,622,354 carry. Those in favor? Those opposed? Vote 115 carry. Shall I report the main estimates to the House? No? Those in favor of me reporting the main estimates to the House? Those opposed? Okay, I will then report the main estimates to the House. Meeting adjourned.